with all this, I actually had a bit of a revelation when you were talking about the fractures there. You know how on the symbol of the fractures, you look at it and it's kind of like a broken halo ring, right?
There's so many possibilities now, like as we start talking about this. There's like a concept art of a Scarab battle with like the Chief art. We never got it.
If we get to see or fight more Endless in the future, I really hope they look like that.
So welcome back everyone to episode 2 of The Infinite Show. So this time we are destroying the Infinite campaign with facts and logic.
Are we though?
We're tearing it apart.
Destroying Tosh. No, I'm kidding.
But we'll analyze, all the aspects, and there will definitely be spoilers in this. If you haven't played it by now, you probably wouldn't even be watching this anyway. Just a fair warning, spoilers. So I wanted to open the video talking about the combat. What did we think of the combat? I'll start with you, Ghost.
I loved it, honestly. I think that was the highlight for the campaign. I think every moment I had was just so exciting. I think it kind of took me back a bit to what Halo 3 kind of did with its gameplay, and that might have been because of the equipment, but something else was the fact that the grapple shot just, I don't know, it just worked so well with Halo's combat. And I think the way like Halo Infinite worked with the drop wall, the thruster, and the other pieces of equipment on the side of Halo. I honestly think the grapple shot just was the highlight of the entire weapon sandbox or equipment sandbox. At all times, I was on my toes because, how the AI would react, and also how the weapons would feel and play. And they all had really distinct roles in the sandbox, which I loved. It made, switching weapons a lot more viable in Halo Infinite. So for me, the gameplay was a 10 out of 10, for sure.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot as well. I think Angry Joe's review just came out today, and he said basically the same thing. The combat was a 10 out of 10. So that's almost like a unanimous thing I've heard. I think the sandbox is so well suited to the game. I think if you actually look at the weapon sandbox in Infinite, it's the most diverse ever, like of any Halo game, basically. Like, a lot of people have been complaining about this, and people even said that it feels like there's no diversity, but the truth is there's more weapons in Infinite than any other game besides maybe Halo 5, but Halo 5 had a lot of like the rec
Warzone and
and a lot of doubling up with the DMR, the BR, the Halo 2 BR, all that. I think Infinite has this huge roster of weapons, like 22 weapons, I think, and on top of that, it doesn't have any redundancy. Well, it has very little redundancy. So as opposed to say Halo 3, where you have the Spiker and the SMG, right? And things like that fill a similar role, but don't really, they fill a similar role and they don't really stand out from each other. I think in Infinite, there's much less redundancy. How about you, Leper?
I think that Infinite's, like you said, unanimously, Infinite's combat loop seems to be universally praised, and I have to agree there. I think it's also because the game lets you do so much in the arenas that you fight in. Like, for example, when you're first introduced to, we've already disclosed spoilers, but the skimmers, and there's that big open area that you fight in, you can like grapple up on top of all the different Forerunner struts and whatever else and into the middle of the room and, like shoot the skimmers as they're coming down earlier and stuff. And the game actually allows you to do that, as opposed to, like Halo 4 and even Reach, I think, where there's a lot of kill boundaries and stuff like that. So I think that the two of those really go hand in hand. I don't want to say Infinite's combat loop is carried by the grapple hook, but it definitely pulls a lot of the weight.
I see what you did there.
It's pretty, it's fun. Like, I'd never thought that I would have, I went into it a bit trepidatious. I was like, how well is this going to work, especially with the unlimited use of equipment? But I think they pulled it off incredibly well, and I can't imagine playing Infinite's campaign without stuff like the grapple shot and whatnot. But in saying that, though, it was so good that I felt that I very rarely, if ever, fell back on any of the other pieces of equipment. Maybe the sensor dart or whatever it's called for like camo elites, and that was really about it. Could just be me though, I'm not sure.
My thoughts on that, I actually, I had the same feelings at first, but I think I wanted to actually go into the game and test what are the ways I can actually make these things useful? Because again, I had the same impression. It felt to me like only the grapple shot was useful. I went in and I tried to find uses for the different equipment, and I feel like, and I think this will segue to another point, I feel like a lot of the issues that people have with the combat in the game can actually be resolved when you actually think about it differently, when you try and use the other equipment. So for example, the hunters. Everyone, well, it's very, very common that people complain about the hunters. The hunters were massively buffed in terms of difficulty. They're way more nimble, way more agile. They have both the machine gun firing mode as well as the regular fuel rod cannon, yeah. And they have more armor as well, and they turn around quicker. It's harder to hit their back. One thing I tried is use the equipment against them, right? Like the thruster, for example, is very useful against the hunters, especially when it's fully upgraded and you get the camo. If you use that against the hunters, that is actually miles better. And if you use a sensor dart as well to keep track of where they both are, it is like night and day difference. But I think the issue with Infinite, right, is that it doesn't really push you towards trying these things out, right? Because it seems like most people haven't discovered that. Most people haven't really tried that because I guess the game hasn't done enough to push people towards that, to push players towards trying different strategies. Again, another thing for fighting the hunters is the fusion coils. And I'd almost say fusion coils are my favorite addition to the sandbox in this game.
Yeah.
Obviously, fusion coils didn't first appear in this game, but they're massively expanded, and the grappling them, and it's like a completely new gameplay feature. I think it pushes you to kind of move around the map far more, because again, circling back to the hunters, fusion coils are so good at the hunters. I think in the hunter battle, what you ought to do, you ought to just basically circle around the arena, seeking out all the fusion coils just to throw them at the hunters. And you can, again, after you throw them, use the evade for a quick dash to get out of there.
I noticed that as well, where on like Legendary, I found myself using the drop wall and the thruster far more often than, say, Heroic. So I wonder if they were thinking about that as well for all the different encounters, where they were thinking, okay, in this area, the player should be using the drop wall, thruster, and maybe the grapple. Or say for this area, the player should be using the threat sensor for, invisible elites. So I think there were small scenarios for that, but I do agree that I wish they kind of forced us a bit more to play with those pieces of equipment at first to, get used to it.
I think it also doesn't help that it's, I don't know if it was just me, but I found that it was kind of difficult to swap between equipment, especially on controller.
Yes.
Like going like up on the D-pad and then left or right or down or whatever it was. And then you also have to worry about like swapping through grenades as well. And there was times when the game, I'd be trying to go from grapple shot to drop wall or something, and it'd be like, nope, sorry, you're going to have the sensor dart now. And you'd just be stuck with that. And so you'd be in the middle of a battle with hunters or something, and they'd be shooting at me, and I'd want to throw down a drop wall, but I just shoot a threat sensor at them, and I think, yeah, that's really helpful. It's not as if they're giant, red, angry boys charging towards me, but that was a bit of a pain. But everything else I think about the equipment was fairly fun. And like you said, I think that there should have been some kind of tutorial-ish segment for some of them. The game just kind of gives them to you, and then expects you to know how to use them and what the scenarios are. And yeah, because the grapple shot is the first thing that you really use, it's probably what most people are going to come back to. And it just has so many utilities as well. Like the kind of like the speed slide you can do with it to just completely sweep through arenas of enemies, and the upgrades and stuff for it are cooked. They're insane. So
yeah, the ground pound.
That is the only time I will.
The ground pound, yeah.
The only time I will ever accept a ground pound in Halo is if it has to do with the grapple shot. That is the only time I will accept it.
I guess I didn't really have that issue with the swapping because I played on keyboard and mouse, right? So
yeah,
it was basically just instant for me. Like it's just 1, 2, 3. Well, I actually banned it to 2, 3, 4, 5. But that's besides
that sounds great.
I'm not hacking here, but it's an instant swap between them. So I just didn't run into that issue.
For me, it was a bit of a thought process, but I won't go into it. Lapers kind of covered that fully, but I agree with, like, on Xbox, I had that issue as well.
So that's the kind of combat, but what about the arenas that the combat actually takes place in? Because that's obviously something that I think we can all agree has attracted a lot of attention over time.
Oh, man. I didn't notice it so much on my first playthrough, but second time around, I was getting some serious Combat Evolved vibes. And not in the good kind of way. Like, I get it, I understand that the game was probably rushed and that there was obviously supposed to be more in between these missions. I think we went over that a little bit more in the first episode with Joe and Joe Staten and him cutting a bunch of crap, but
that doesn't mean you can't criticize it.
That's right.
Also true. But it felt like there was a lot of instances where I was getting deja vu, and I was not wrong. I made sure to record whenever it happened, and there are a few instances where early on in the campaign you fight in a certain arena and then you'll come back to the exact same one later in the game. I will say though, despite the copy pasting of certain arenas and whatnot, they are very open, which I appreciate, like I touched on before, and they are incredibly well designed. Very well designed. Yeah. I'm not just talking from a gameplay design standpoint, but architecturally and in terms of visuals, it's really well done. I think 343 have finally got the Forerunner art style pretty much nailed. They've managed to carry over some of the more neon kind of Tron-esque vibes of Halo 4 and 5, while still having the more kind of brutalist look and tones and color palette of the Bungie era stuff. Like there are some moments in the campaign where you're walking through a Forerunner corridor or area or whatever, and it's like, wow, this feels like it was ripped straight from a Halo 3 multiplayer level or something, or the Ark, the first mission where you're actually on the Ark. There's a couple of interior segments that feel a lot like that.
I think another thing, the scale. That's probably my favorite thing regarding the art. Regarding the art department and the Forerunner designs, like the spire, for example, just seeing the massive spire looming over the environment, the giant mountains. I think the scale of the world was really well done. I think they executed it brilliantly. My favorite thing about those interior environments is the verticality, right? You can basically go, if you actually try and break the vertical limit of those maps, you can basically just climb up the wall and just touch the ceiling. You can literally skip through so many areas of the campaign by just Spider-Manning your way through it, right? And a lot of the design of these areas, it's almost built like cathedrals or something, like chapels, where, you can actually get, there's almost like rafters at the top. And if you're actually creative about it, and this is something I see most people missed, and to be fair, I was inspired to do this myself by seeing many of the reviews, particularly a certain person's review where he talks about there's no verticality on these levels. So
G-man.
I was specifically inspired to go and test out that theory within the levels, and I found that, oh wow, there's actually a ton of verticality. You can basically climb up and just hang on these rafters, and you can almost just skip through entire levels. You can skip through the entire encounter at the very least.
I think as well, like if we start talking about the missions in and of themselves, if I was to show you guys a photo of one of the Forerunner interiors or Forerunner environments, could you guys tell me the mission?
Look, probably not. Probably not.
Yeah, I think there are some the one where they're making. Well, I don't even remember the name of the mission, but I remember it was the Hexagon Factory. I remember that.
Hexagon Factory.
And they're building the hexagons. Yes. Yeah. I think that had a fair that you can riff on the Forerunner style and have different colors and slightly different art direction, right? Because that has a different lore context. It's actually the place where the components of the Halo was built, right? So it's the Hexagon Factory.
So okay, that makes sense. And as you say, that is now a familiar thing. But and I will say this as well. Every single environment I think was just absolutely gorgeous. That was a big thing for me as I was just walking through all of these, interiors and going from interior to interior. I think for me, you guys may or may not agree with this, but I think the Forerunner structures were just my favorite in the series, from all the way from Combat Evolved to Infinite. I just feel like Infinite just got it right. I don't know how best I can.
It's hard to understate just how much they really did nail it.
They really did.
They 343 finally managed to get it right. Like you said, Nerd, the kind of gothic chapel-esque environments mixed with that otherworldly metal utilitarian structure that the spire in particular has such a unique silhouette. You can see it from across the map, And the amazing thing is, like, if that was something in Combat Evolved, you'd probably see it out in the distance and you'd go, what is that? You know, you'd come up with all these crazy theories, but the great thing about this game is that you actually get to go inside and see what it's for. The same, you know, they kind of do the same with the what are they called? The beam emitter towers, or they call them spires in this game, I think, or something along those lines. Infinite does a really good job of breaking down the mystery of these structures while still keeping a fair amount intact, and you still wonder how they all work, but it kind of fulfills that childhood fantasy of really wanting to venture outside of the playable area in some of the older Halo games and wonder what is there and how it all works and stuff. So it's kind of a dream come true.
Yeah. So I think it's a good thing you brought up those beam emitter towers, because that has been quite divisive, because I keep going back to my review, but I said in my review that I actually love that mission where you go to the different beam emitter towers, but a lot of people found it tedious. Like, I'll give an example of one person. I read someone saying this somewhere. He was saying, like, oh, it was so tedious having to load up my Razorback full of Marines every time with like skewers or with snipers or whatever. And I'm just thinking, like, what? Dude, don't load up your Razorback every time. Just get the Banshee and go straight there.
Bro, they're everywhere as well.
Like, it goes at the speed you want it to go. You know, you don't.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, you know, if he's arguing, if he's arguing that that's tedious, then would by extension he be arguing that, you know, the same mission in Combat Evolved where you go to 3 different spires and rescue the Marines there is tedious? Like, you know, it's I think arguably I think Infinite was at its best when it incorporated the open world elements with the linear missions, like the AA gun mission and the Spire mission in particular. I thought was really, really well done. Like, it sure as hell got annoying when, you know, Cortuna every 2 seconds was saying, we better check out that Spire. But it's like, no, I want to keep saving the Marines. Shut up. But
shut up, weapon. Shut up, do my thing.
But I just thought it was so great how you had...
Don't make me delete you.
Just does it outside of the mission. And send her off.
But no, I love the fact that the game gives you the way to approach them however you want. Like, going in the Razorback and mounting it up full of Marines is one way to do it, but you can literally just take the grapple hook and like stealth your way around if you're good enough at it. Like, I did this a few times.
And like, go around the back.
Go around the back, get up on top of the spire, and then just snipe all the other dickheads who are facing the other way. And then there you go, you've done it. Like, you don't have to approach it just that one way. You can do it however. Whereas the linear campaign missions are, well, they're just that. They're linear. Like, it does give you freedom within the play spaces, but definitely nowhere near as much as that, which is really, really cool. I like how they did that.
I think one good thing is it doesn't go overboard with the freedom. Like, it's not like a Far Cry game, right? It's like a Far Cry game where, you know, basically any strategy is viable and the enemies never really pose a real threat because there's so many, you know, there's so many viable strategies against them that you'll basically always go for the easiest, the simplest, and the quickest strategy. You know, there's no real thinking outside the box, right? But in Halo Infinite, I think there is, because there are counters to like the weapons you have. Like, let's say, for example, you do try and go in with the Banshee. There are other Banshees that will try and shoot you down. There are enemies on the ground with shock rifles and the dynamo grenades, right? So there are obstacles for every strategy you can take against a certain challenge.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what makes all the encounters so special and kind of like memorable as well, because you can choose how you want to approach the, you know, like especially that mission where it's, you know, you have to go to the 4 spires, or it's not spires, sorry, the 4 beam emitters. And I think that mission was actually like one of the highlights for me, because not only could I take my time with it, but I could also approach each, you know, beam emitter or like area with like, you know, a different weapon, different vehicle. And for me, like my highlight, and I remember this like really strong in my brain as I'm talking about it right now. I remember approaching the last one and I was rolling up with the tank and I was just blowing the shit out of everything. And the music was kicking in as well, and it just, I don't know, the experience was really good. Then I hopped out, jacked a ghost, and I don't know, the experience of that last one for me just really resonates and sticks in my head. So I don't know, those moments I don't think you could have if it was just one set experience. or like set piece the entire time. And I did miss set pieces in Halo Infinite's campaign, like, don't get me wrong, but I just like the fact that you can approach these missions and approach these areas in however way you choose. You know, if you want to take a vehicle, you can take a vehicle. If you want to be stealth, as Slaper said, you can get a sniper. But that's the beauty. I think that's the beauty of Halo Infinite's open world as well. And like, I did. That's one thing. Like, I don't know if we're going to touch on that, but I did definitely miss like a Scarab boss battle.
Oh yeah.
I think that would have worked really well, and that might have been actually cut. There's like a concept, or like a concept art of a Scarab battle with like the Chief, and I think it was in Chief's old armor. But I think it's in the Halo Infinite art book. I'll have to double check, but I believe there was a lot more intended. I mean, as we all know, 2/3 were cut. But I just think a Scarab battle was always intended, but we never got it. So
wow, that's
Yeah.
that Scarab looks fucking sick. Like, I'm just putting that out there right now. I love the spikes along the top
damn.
there, and the red the red eye cannon there. I love the Halo Wars 2 Scarab design. I love how utilitarian it is, and it doesn't have the top headpiece, but that looks fucking awesome.
It's got the top headpiece in this one, which I think would have worked better for like a campaign.
Yeah.
Like, in case you attack with a wasp, but
I think if they were going to add the Scarab back, they would have to design it differently, because let's be real. When we go back and play Halo 3 now, the Scarab, it's easy as piss.
It's a bit of a pushover, yeah.
It is.
It's a real pushover, because it was kind of cool the first time, but once you figured out how to do it, once you figured out how its weak points work, it's not intimidating whatsoever. So they would need to redesign its like weak points and how to conquer it and all that. So one of the biggest pieces of content that kind of fills in the open world is the collectibles and things like that, like the audio logs, the high value targets. A lot of people did feel that content was kind of bog standard, but I think they pulled it off pretty well. My favorite thing about it was basically that it's all optional, right? Like, it doesn't force you to go aside. Like, I think a lot of people went into the game thinking it was like a typical open world game where they'd have to do all these obligatory side objectives, but the side objectives, like the data pads and stuff, they were just a good addition they were just like regular collectibles in previous Halo games, right? So I actually like them. What do you guys think of the data pads and things like that?
I think another thing is like the voice acting on the data pads was really good. I was expecting, some subpar voice acting, especially considering it was like, background audio logs.
True.
But everyone, I just actually kind of stopped my gameplay and I decided to just listen to it. And all the ones with Estrom, Lasky, even the Spartans, like Spartan, Griffin, and I've forgotten the rest. Fuck. But, those audio logs actually had a lot of depth to them, which is great. Kind of built those characters up. The Spartans that you discover inside of Halo. I wanted to hear a bit more about, Blue Team, and, what happened to Fireteam Osiris coming from Halo 5. Even though I despised Halo 5 with my living soul, I still think, they needed to do a bit more in that regard to fill us in, with those characters. But Lasky's a fan favorite, and I'm very happy he's alive. I just wish we saw him, like a Captain Keys kind of thing on the ring. That was my only downside of the story, but we'll go into that in a bit.
Yeah, I think it's clear from the audio logs that Esherim had a bit of a crush on Atriox.
I mean, Halo has always done, terminals and audio logs and data pads and stuff like that, so to not have it would have made it feel a bit empty, and I think people would be complaining a lot more if they weren't there. I don't think that they're the best in the series by any stretch. I still think that Halo 3 ODSTs are pinnacle in terms of audio logs, especially because if you collect all of them, there's actually more to it. Like, you get the when you get to Data Hive, I think it is, and the police officer turns against you and you have to kill him, which is I think the first time you like in a game like have to kill a human target, which is pretty big milestone for a Halo game.
Breaking ground there.
Yeah. I mean, not as if you did it to Captain
Call of Duty.
Yeah, not as if you had to do it to Captain Keys. But it was. I think they were handled relatively well, and I'm glad that they did fill in even just a little bit of the story between Halo 5 and Infinite. And yeah, like you said, hearing that Lasky was my boy Lasky was still alive. I was really happy to hear that, because I was worried that, like you, as much as I hate Halo 5, we also have to remember that there is a fair amount of stuff left over from that game and from Halo 4, and I was very worried that 343 were just gonna throw the baby out with the the baby out with the Barbie water. Yeah, the baby out with the bathwater, and just completely forget about it. And they kind of did, but not completely, which I appreciate.
I think a lot of the datapad stuff, it actually goes back. I think it's written really fundamentally into Halo's DNA. I think it's actually a holdover from the Bungie era. That's kind of it's Halo and just the kind of terminals and environmental, almost environmental storytelling, right? Is kind of built into Halo's DNA, and it comes from. It actually predates Halo even. It was actually similar to that in Marathon. Marathon kind of pushed forward heavily very early on in just the entire history of shooters. Like terminals are basically how the entire story is told in Marathon. And I think that has, in very subtle ways, you know, gone on to influence the Halo series and remains to the Halo series even to this day with completely different developers. And I mean, like even Joe Staten, right? He wasn't even working at Bungie when they made Marathon, but yet it still somehow subtly found its way into this game in very subtle ways. And I think it goes even beyond that. The characterization of, say, the weapon, for example, in that moment right after the chief tries to delete her, she kind of taunts you about how you're just some reckless killing machine. And I just have to say, for me, knowing the story of Marathon and actually listen to it, it is so eerily similar to Durandal in the terminals for Marathon mocking you, the player, for basically the same thing, for just being an uncaring killing machine, someone who only cares about the mission. In a sense, the Master Chief is basically just a carbon copy of the main character from Marathon, right? So it's going to make similar metatextual commentary, you know, through the characters.
I would not be surprised if 343 took a fairly big chunk of inspiration from Marathon and went back and played some of those games in preparation for Infinite. Because yeah, like you said, there is a lot of... I mean, I haven't played Marathon per se, but I do know a fair amount about
No one has.
Yeah. It's influenced Halo's story from the beginning, like AI rampancy and stuff like that. So again, it's another... I think it's another example of...
created.
Well, yeah. It's another example of 343, I think, paying homage to these early games and doing their research and going as far back as Marathon to get more, I guess, more stuff for their story and making it feel more like a Bungie era game, at least kind of story-wise, and not losing touch with that, while still being able to push their own new narrative with the Endless and all that. So
Endless.
Yeah. they were telling us right from the get-go. I mean, with the subtitle Infinite, weren't they?
They copyrighted the name Halo the Endless, didn't they?
I think so. Yeah. Story DLC confirmed.
I'll send you guys a picture. I'll see if I can find it.
Wait, do you mean the actual like character, like the enemies, or?
Yeah.
Wait for
this is gonna be a shit post. This is gonna be a shit post.
Yeah. Looks like
Put on his
these.
feet. I'm waiting for it. Oh my god. Are those prawns?
No, it's like those prehistoric endless, you know? They're endless.
No, I think that they're supposed to be the same species as the, why can't I remember a name? That fucking flappy fishmouth person, the Harbinger.
Yeah.
I think they're supposed to be the same species. At least that's what I've gathered, and their real name is the Zalanin or something like that.
Or what?
Yeah, it's X something.
Yeah, the Zalanin. I think there was some terminals with Despondent Pyre, the artifacts, the ones that like the big rings.
Okay.
And she just... Oh, no, maybe it's one... Maybe it's a different one.
And they can time travel. Going back to the Marathon comparisons, if you look at the Endless and some of the concept art, did you see some of the concept art where they were wearing robes? Or where the Harbinger had like robes on? It looked just like the Sfut, however it's pronounced, from Marathon, which is like the floating dudes who wear robes. And beyond that, the third Marathon game was called Marathon Infinity, and it introduced time travel to the game series, and it had a whole plot centered around time travel. So I'm not saying they copied it, but I'd find it very hard to believe that not a single person at 343 went back and looked at Marathon when making this game.
I think I prefer that more than the design that was actually in the game. I really love the silhouette for that.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, I dig that. If we get to see or fight more Endless in the future, I really hope they look like that, because that is a very dare I say, iconic design. I feel like 343 have kind of been leading into this idea of time travel and multiverses to an extent, because we, like the whole Tenrai event thing is based on presumably some kind of alternate universe armor set. And like in Master Chief Collection as well, with the Norse mythology themed ones and all that other stuff, and the medieval themed ones. I think like canonically they are from some alternate version of the Halo universe where some leading army or whatever takes influence over humanity's future, which is why we have like the medieval and the Japanese themed armor sets.
With all this, I actually had a bit of a revelation when you were talking about the fractures there. You know how on the symbol of the fractures, you look at it and it's kind of like a broken Halo ring, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's kind of like a piece coming off.
Shit.
Yeah. And now they call them fractures. There's, fractures of the Halo ring and things from different universes. So,
you big-brained hard there.
Maybe this fracture of the Halo ring, maybe, just maybe it can travel to different universes.
I mean, so many franchises now are setting up the whole multiverse thing. Like Marvel's done it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fortnite.
Yeah, fucking Fortnite has done it.
Too. Oh my god.
Oh, DC, that was it. DC is doing it as well. Yeah, with Flashpoint. So everyone is kind of hopping on board the crossover train after Endgame sort of started it. And, the only way you can really get bigger than a crossover is if you throw in the multiverse. Halo could be setting up its own... it already is. It's already kind of setting up its own multiverse, at least within the multiplayer and that. Not so much in the story, but maybe at some point down the line they could. So Microsoft wants a bit of that multiversal crossover pie.
So let's talk about the characters in the story. I like that it had a very lean cast. That was, like I said, I've been very positive on this game, which I haven't even expected from myself. I was expecting to dislike it more than I did, but I liked the characters. I liked that was a very lean cast. It was basically two allies and two baddies, and only one of the baddies is basically just foreshadowing anyway. There's only one main bad guy. So, I don't know, what do you guys think of the very lean cast?
It's good. It's very good.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think taking it back to the roots.
Starting from the ground floor,
Yeah, well, I mean, with...
Not trying to be over-ambitious.
Well, yeah, Halo 5 got a bit complicated. There was a lot going on in that game, between, all 4 members of Blue Team with Chief, and then all these other characters being introduced with Fireteam Osiris. As much as it might have helped the whole co-op experience, they didn't...
Did it, though?
Yeah, no, maybe not. They
I'm saying split screen probably would have helped the experience more than any of that stuff.
Let's stop attacking Halo 5.
Stop it, he's already dead. But it's just there was two, like, I can understand why for a newer player that would probably be like way too much to try and keep a grip on. So going back to a more simple story where it is just, yourself as Master Chief and the pilot and the weapon, it works fairly well, and there is a very good kind of family dynamic between them that grows throughout the course of the story. And it is emotional. And it's kind of like Chief's gateway to finding some kind of semblance of humanity again, which is I think 343 wrote that incredibly well. So big props to them. And man, if I know we've barely even had Fernando and the weapon for one game, but man, if anything happens to them, I will kill everyone and then myself.
And then yourself. I agree though. Like the characters, they had a lot more, I don't know, like emotional weight to them, and I felt like every scene that the 3 of them were in, I didn't explain it. Like for me, that's what elevated the story in a sense, because especially the Master Chief, like we've not seen him be this I want to say badass but also human in a game before. Like Halo 4, I think it was a very drastic change, I think, from Halo 3. I really did enjoy the story for Halo 4, but I think Halo Infinite's Master Chief just does a better job at still, being the classic Master Chief that we all know and love, with the one-line quips, but also he has that human element to him where he's not afraid to open up and, let someone in. At first he was with the weapon, we see that he wants to delete her, but then
character growth.
exactly his development from the start, from not trusting anyone. He allows these people to get close to him. And of course, the weapon. She was very off the bat. She was very. I don't want to say
Naive.
That's the word. That's it. Yeah, she was very, very naive. And even the Harbinger was thinking she could take advantage of that. But even her progression as a character, you could see, because at the end, she got a lot more confident in what she was doing and a bit more comfortable with also working with the Master Chief.
And I think another issue that many people had with the story is that it did to many people, and I can understand how, to a lot of new players, it would feel very overwhelming and very convoluted. Like, I don't think it should have opened with that Atriox stuff. No new player knows who that stuff is, right? It should still have tied all that stuff up, but it should have focused on the, Escharum, pilot, and weapon plot. It should have opened with that and should have given a very simple through line and then kind of focused on that other tying up the loose end stuff later. Because again, that stuff basically, it led a lot of people astray to think that the story was more complex or convoluted than it really was. It was actually quite a simple, just villain story and building a cast of characters.
That's another point though. Like, did you guys feel that you also missed a part of the story? Like during that 6-month period, did you also think that how awesome would it have been to just play? I feel like the first mission could have even been that.
The impression I got from that is that they're setting up a lot of these events to be further DLC. Like, they've made it clear from the beginning that they want this to be a live service, and they are doing more campaign DLC. So when you talk about the big points I think are the Endless, Atriox, and Lasky and the Infinity. They're the big teasers for the DLC. I think pretty clear to me at least. I think they're definitely going to build upon that. So that's another thing I actually wanted to talk about, Atriox. I think the way they're setting it up, it seems to me at least that Escharum was kind of a grizzled ancient veteran, but at the same time it was kind of just like a dumb monkey. He was just monologuing at Chief all the time. He was never going to outsmart Chief at any point. He wasn't the prophet of truth, right? They're setting up Atriox as clearly something far more advanced, right? Something
like a Thanos,
far smarter. Yeah, I guess so. I think they are a bit influenced by Marvel as well. So
yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong, but chronologically, the last time we see Atriox is in a flashback sequence where Cortana blows up the ring, presumably with Atriox on it. So how does he? What happens there? There's a big gap between, getting blown up and then sent back in time, or blown up and sent to wherever he is now, but he's presumably on Zeta Halo because it looks...
How do you know it's blown up?
There's so many possibilities now, as we start talking about this.
The game is, what's the word for it? It's infinite.
Oh, for fuck's sakes.
My God. Do you have an infinite counter on this video? How many times have you said?
Infinite.
Oh, no, please don't. I'm the one who's editing this, remember?
I've just got a gun to his head during this.
Yeah.
Kill me now.
So guys, I think it's about time to wrap it up. I think this has been a good chat. I think we've had some real revelations along the way. I think we've discovered the true meaning of the fractures and what they're kind of subtly implying there.
And their infinite possibilities.
Oh, God. Kill me. No, I'm kidding.
Anyway, this is Shredded Nerd signing out. I'll let you guys...
I don't go all at once!
Laper?
Like and subscribe. You wouldn't.
I'm not scared.
You're not a coward.
I'm not subscribed. Oh, wait, hang on. I'm not scared. I will... Wait, hang on. Fuck. I'm just up to both of them, but you guys should do, everyone a favour. Subscribe to them. They are both legends. If you found yourself laughing, just do yourself a favour. These guys are absolutely hilarious. And, if you like some Aussie... Oh, hang on. We're all Aussie. Hang on. hang on. If you want an extra Aussie to listen to, come over to my channel as well. But, yeah. Thank you, boys, for having me on again. It's been a good discussion, as always.
All right. Thank you all, and goodbye.